Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We got a few more things for 1979 Topps that we didn't bring up in the main video. You can see that video down in the description below, but we've got a few more things we want to discuss, so let's get into them. Yeah, the first on the list is the AL Phantom Shortstop, as they call it. As you know, in 79 Topps, every player from 78 that was on the All-Star team got a banner on the bottom of their card, that said AL All-Star or NL All-Star. And they missed one. It was in the AL shortstop category. It was a Freddie Patek of the Kansas City Royals. And what had happened was his card came out in 79 Topps, but there was no designation for the All-Star. I did some digging, did some reading, and there was a few, firsthand accounts where some of the kids were actually looking for that card, or they were trying to get the set of those All-Star players, and nobody ever found a shortstop for the American League. And that's because Topps did not print one. They had done this a few other times throughout the year, but in 79, they did it for Freddie Patek, who never got his designation as an All-Star. In 1979 Topps, we also saw the removal of the Rookie Cup, which was very, very prominent throughout the years. It dropped in 79. There were no cards with the Cup. And that stayed like that till 1986. It went through 1986 and came back in 1987 with the Rookie Cup. But that year before, they did have it in 78. And 79, they dropped it for some reason. No explanation. It just wasn't on there anymore that year. We all know during this time that Topps was in, disputes, lawsuits back and forth with Fleer, because Fleer was trying to get the rights to create cards with players too. And I don't know if this relates to it, but in 79, just a small quirk, we went from 14 cards to 12 cards in a pack. The price stayed the same. I think it was around 20 cents, but 2 less cards in the pack. And I'm sure kids in those days had to remember that, and say, what's going on here? Less cards this year? But I wasn't around. I was a young kid, but I wasn't collecting in 79, so I can't say for sure. But there was a difference, and, was it related to the lawsuit that was going through? Was Topps trying to rein back a little bit, save money? We don't know, but they did go from 14 to 12 cards in 1979. So obviously in 1979 Topps, we had a Pete Rose card. You can't have a set without Pete Rose at that time of the year in the late 70s. But in 78, he signed a deal with the Philadelphia Phillies to play with them the next season. However, the card in 79 was with him with the Reds. And I think it just shows a little bit of how it was tough now with the new free agency market for Topps at the time to keep up with those changes, because pictures were taken either the year before or even, in spring training. So they couldn't keep up on a lot of stuff. And this was just another example of it. Nothing crazy. We see it all the time. But I thought I'd like to point that out, that, they didn't keep up with Pete Rose. And, kids were pulling the packs and pulling the cards, and it was him and the Reds. And everybody knew, hey, he's playing for the Phillies. And, that year he got a very good deal with them. He's probably, I believe he was the top paid player at that particular moment in baseball on the team. So, Topps just tried to keep up, and sometimes it wasn't that easy. So yeah, in 1979, Topps also introduced something they call Topps Comics. What it was a bubble gum wrapped with a wax paper. But if you open that wax paper up, it had baseball players. There was 33. They were separate from the baseball cards. They were their own thing. They actually sold them in series throughout the year. When you open it up, it had a caricature of the player, had some trivial facts about the player. Players such as Nolan, Ryan, Yastrzemski, all the greats. I believe like a quarter or a third of them were future Hall of Famers at the time. But anyways, Topps released these. They didn't do so well. As the series went on, these kind of faded away. The sales went down each series. It was based, actually, if you remember, on 1973 prototypes that they did, which were never released. But the idea came from that, and they tried to re-release it. However, it never really gained traction because the wax paper, and you don't really see those many nowadays because that wax paper was fragile. Obviously, a lot of kids ripped it off of there, to get the gum. It was just, it was called Major League Baseball bubble gum. sold for 5 cents, but it was something that Topps had tried years ago. They tried to reintroduce it. It didn't work. Could it have been tied to Topps trying to push different products with the pending lawsuit coming out from Fleer? They had been doing this, like I mentioned, 3 or 4 years. Fleer was trying to get the cards, out for them. So was Topps trying to add more exposure for their name out there? We don't know. It's just a fact that they tried this, it never worked, and it never came back. And incidentally, they also at the same time were trying this exact same idea with Marvel Comics and Spider-Man, where piece of gum, you open it up and it was Spider-Man comics in there, panel comics, as you remember from the old comics. So they tried it in both, I guess, to see which would stick. And obviously the Topps baseball version never did, and it quietly went away into the annals of Topps. But I will add that it did come out as kind of a tribute in 2023 Topps Archive, I believe. So even something that seemed like nobody wanted in 79, they brought back in 23 just to put in some of the cards. But, who knows about that. So an interesting release in 79 was from a gentleman named Dr. James Beckett, who we all know from Beckett Monthly, which started in 1984, the monthly price guide, which started with baseball, and we did football, and then we did hockey, and I believe even basketball. But in 1979, he introduced something called the Sport Americana Price Guide. And this was the first kind of big compilation book about pricing for cards. And it kind of started with this, and it didn't really, it was geared towards older cards more, but it was introduced by him, and it kind of changed, I think, not everybody, but it changed the way people looked at cards. And it's interesting that that was released the same year as the 79 Topps. So, from that point on, did things kind of change in how people started to see the hobby? And I'm not talking everybody, but I'm talking different people saw the hobby differently just because of this book. And there were other price sheets and things in the past, but this was one big book that came out. And I think it was the first attempt at a large compilation of pricing. And did it change the way we looked at cards? And obviously by the junk wax era and even 84, Beckett had million or so subscribers and more who looked at this book monthly to see what the prices were on cards. I know I did. I'm not going to lie. I looked at that and, you open the book, you go, oh my gosh, this one's worth how much? Oh my gosh, this is up to $5. And you would, opening cards, you wanted to get your favorite players, but you get that one, that Jose Canseco 1986 Donruss, or that 1987 whatever, and you'd go, oh, this is the one that's $15 in the Beckett Priceley. So that was interesting. That did 79 Topps correspond with that, that push from Dr. Beckett in his new book? Who knows? But it's just an interesting timing of those two. Well, that's all I got for 79 Topps. I hope you enjoyed that. We're going to end it here. Take care and have a great day.